sound will be symptomatic.
So, good afternoon to all my students present for the third session, Unit 3 of Block 1 in our journey of International Human Resource Management Practices. So, after having a conceptual clarity related to the basic processes of the organization's journey from domestic level of territory to the global organizations, we have understood different approaches, we have understood the different theories associated with that. Let us continue with some other aspects related to this organization's journey, which seems to be more important for managing these organizations at international level itself. We are continuing with our third session, which deals with cross-cultural diversity, which is one of the important aspects for the organizations to survive on a long run for any sort of globalization processes. So before we move to the different sort of diversities in international organizations, let us first have an insight into the concept of diversity. What does this mean? So whenever we talk of diversity, we refer to people belonging to different race, ethnicity, ability, gender, sexual orientation, even to some extent neurodiversity. All of them, they come and work at the same place. So here we do understand that organizations represent a wide variety of human resources belonging to different categories, and all of them, they work at the same workplace. To classify some of them, if we do talk of this diversity, which is based on gender, we do have male, female employees and transgender employees nowadays, which come and work at the same workplace itself. When we talk of age diversity, we are talking of this generation of employees. When we classify all those human resources in terms of different sort of generations, we do talk of generation X employees, generation Y employees, Gen Z employees, we do talk of baby boomers, millennials, we do talk of veterans. There's a mix, employee mix at the same workplace. The problem is that all of these different generation employees do have different sort of expectations from the workplace. And that is why we need to manage all of their expectations to align their productivities in line of the organization itself. We do talk of this ethnic diversity, where we to say people belonging to different nationalities, people belonging to different cultures, traditions, customs, different sort of habits, and all of them, they come and work at the same workplace. Even we do talk of diversities in terms of physical abilities, able-bodiedness, or diversity in terms of neuro aspects, right? So disabilities, whether these people can really cope with the challenges, what sort of aspects are dealing with this disabilities of the people. All of them, they create a different sort of aspect for the organizations. That is why managing this diversity is a complex process. However, these diversities do have many advantages and positive aspects for the organizations that we'll explore right now. So understanding this diversity, let us talk of this diversity wheel, where you can see there are 5 layers of diversities, right? Now, first or core, as we have understood in our previous classes, that it lies with the concerned individual itself, in terms of the personality and the related aspects which creates the first layer of diversity is what we call it as the primary layer of diversity. That comes because of the association of people to different race, people belonging to different age, ethnic characteristics, genders, sexual orientation, place of origin, disabilities, culture, all of them, they are related to the concerned individual itself. So the primary level of diversity is related to the individual itself. The secondary level of diversity is also related to the individual, but it is a peripheral, the impact of the society, the impact of culture on individuals itself. Like whenever we talk of appearances, the impact of language, accent, the military veteran status, the groups to which people do affiliate themselves, the socio-economic status, the relationship or their partnership status, geographical location, religion, spirituality, parental, family status, education, immigration status, all of those are related to the concerned individual and do have a significant impact on the business processes itself. That is what we need to understand. The third layer is the impact of culture on the diversity of the people itself. So whether the society or the organization or the groups to which we associate ourselves do have a specific culture, or the culture does have an impact on those kind of groups we are associated with. Say in terms of what is the impact of this competitive environment on that particular group, or there is a cooperation among the members, whether there is whether these groups or organizations are promoted by flexibility or a structured environment, what sort of hobbies and interests these groups do exhibit because of the cultural implications. Similarly, the body languages, the personal space that people do have, the thinking styles, leadership styles, whether people are individualistic or collectivists, like people do prefer to accomplish their goals at an individual responsibility, accountability, or they do believe in team work, team preferences. That is what that we need to take into consideration. What is the approach that we need to have for resolving any kind of conflict that may be there within the members of the group itself? We do have these working styles, different sort of working styles of the people, belief systems, the views and power authority, values, traditions, communication style. All of these sort of things are there within the organization because of the impact that the culture does have on the organizations. Like we focused yesterday on understanding the culture, and it is said that a common system, a common shared value, a common predisposition held by all the members of the organization that leads to a systematic behavioral pattern of the people is what we call it as a culture itself. That is what. The last layer is the organizational layer, where people do have different sort of experiences, expertise, the industry to which they belong to, the job role, title, job functions, field of work, what is the seniority in terms of the tenure, volunteer work, in office, or the work in a hybrid system, remote system. We to talk of a virtual organizational system. What is the management status, work location, label, business unit division, career path, union affiliation, networks that is people do have. All of them, they lead to different sort of diversities among the people itself. What we need to understand is that when, to say people belonging to different category of this diversified system or diversity will, all of them, they come and work at the same workplace. Isn't it challenging and difficult for us to manage? That is why understanding this diversity at international level is more significant before proceeding to any other aspects. Because most of the time it is observed that the international assignments do fail. Reason being, people are not, or the international assignees, like we have understood, expatriates, they couldn't accommodate themselves with these cultural adaptations. diversities. And that is the reason why international assignments do fail because of culture shock. And we need to understand. This is essential because whenever we do talk of this diversity, we do say that these cultural differences are significant. And as we go from domestic level of organization to international level of organizations, right, the journey of the organization goes hand in hand with this diversity. You don't have an option. It has to be managed. That is why we need to talk of this, the impact that this diversity may have on the business practices, the impact this diversity may have on relationships, the impact this diversities may have on the communication process itself. Let us first understand like what sort of impact this cross-cultural diversities do have on the business itself. Let us talk of different sort of diversities that international organizations do face in its journey. Right? Now, one of the major important aspect of this diversity is the communication practices or the aspects related to this communication itself, communication styles. Whenever we talk of this communication style, let us understand it in two different aspects. First, let us talk of this communication as a direct mode of communication and communication as an indirect mode of communication. Like in our previous class, we have understood, we classify all of those cultures into two classes. There are cultures which are high contextual in nature. There are cultures which are low contextual in nature. Now, if I do talk of this cultures which are high contextual, highly context oriented, it is observed that those kind of organizations do believe, or those kind of cultures do believe indirect way of communication. These things, these communication styles are implicit. They are not direct, right? So in high contextual cultures, most of the communications are based on relationships. Most of the communications are based on mutual trust, right? So we do talk of contexts which are low. There, people do prefer to have direct communications. People do prefer to have explicit communications. People do prefer to have clear communications. Right? Similarly, if I do talk of this communication from the perspectives of verbal communication and non-verbal communications, as I said, contexts which are high, there people do prefer to have this non-verbal communications. Non-verbal communications do play a very significant role, right? Non-verbal communications, in a sense, you can say like people who speak something, but their body languages do say something. So the importance of body language has to be taken into consideration for this purpose. But the cultures which are low in context, right, low contextual cultures, so they are people to prefer to have all verbal communications. Those kind of differences are to be understood, right? We are talking of the hierarchical structures. To what extent, right, the organizations do respect their seniors, do respect the leaders, and how this structure does have an impact on the organization's practices is what is defined in terms of the hierarchical structure. If I have to talk of these countries, like traditional countries, like we are talking of Japan, China, Brazil kind of countries, right? So they prefer this new generation employees to treat the old generation employees with a difference. So here, a clear segregation is established in terms of the generations of the people. Traditional cultures do prefer people with experiences to take up senior level of positions. But contrary to that, if we to talk of countries like United States, where the culture values individualism, the culture values equality, equality. So, so there is no such differentiation in terms of the seniority, but people do prefer to have a differentiation in terms of their performances, in terms of their abilities, capabilities. So that is what that brings a differentiation in terms of the practice itself. The kind of negotiation style that the organizations do have. And this is an inherent part whenever we are going for any such internationalization process. We have to negotiate with different stakeholders of the host country itself. So we need to understand what sort of things do really impact these negotiations of the people. And if we do come out with a concept in Japan, that is the Haragi, what it says that they value the power of silence. On a negotiation table, they prefer to be quiet. They prefer less talking with the other parts itself, right? But contrary to that, if we do talk of like other, right, negotiations where it is more of a combative nature. So arguments, proposals, counter proposals. So there is a complete differentiation in terms of the Eastern economies to the Western economies. We'll explore those kind of things. Similarly, scheduling and time management. If we do talk of that, what is the significance of time? To what extent people are particularistic about time? Like in a country like Germany, where being late by 1 hour or 2 hours in a meeting is common. We do talk of Indian context. Like most of the time we do refer it as Indian timing. So being there late for the meeting by half an hour or 1 hour is common. But the same may not be there with other cultures. So we need to understand the significance of time in sense of the culture itself. What is the impact that the culture does have on the time sense of the people? We are talking of business etiquettes itself. Say common forum, right? How do you accept a business card? Normally we do prefer, like this Asian economies, we do prefer to give or accept a business card with both the hands. Taking it in one hand, keeping it in the pocket are offensive in nature. We need to understand that. To what extent would you talk of people to prefer work-life balance? Out of a survey, it has been found out that only 3.3% of the Canadian workforce, they prefer to work longer hours, whereas 14.1% of Israel people prefer to work for longer hours. Some of the cultures where organizations are included in the personal life of the individual. In some of the cultures, organization is excluded. So to what extent we are connected, associated with the organization, that is what that defines the level of work and life balance. To what extent we are dedicated for being available on holidays out of the organizations. All of those things matter. And what we need to understand is what sort of cultural implications are there for that. We're talking of this attitude towards risk itself. Now, in our previous class, we have understood the Hofstede's culture and the attitude of the people for the risk taking, uncertainties. If we talk of cultures like Brazil, Japan, France, Mexico, they do they do not prefer to take risks, right? They do not like uncertainties. They want everything to be defined in a proper way, everything to be spelled out in a proper way. Job roles are to be defined, expectations are to be defined, everything. Right? So while carrying out certain aspects of the future, they want that to be highly particularistic in approach. But if we to talk of places like United States, or you can think of Australia or UK even, right? So there, people do take this risks of uncertainties. So all it depends on the kind of organizations we are. Similarly, gifting, right? Like some of the cultures where you'll see that, uh, like in USA, United States, gifts are accepted by the people, but not in relation to the business activities, business context. They don't prefer gifts in business context. But whereas, if we to talk of these countries like China and Sweden, there you'll see that if for a business context, gifts are not being exchanged, that is considered as something really a rude activity. So, where we are dealing with, what we are dealing with, have to be taken into consideration. Some of the cultures are there where even this gifting system is being considered as a form of bribery. So it has to be considered like that way, right? Finally, we have to come out with this decision-making ability, whether these decisions are taken centralizedly or these decisions are taken in a deferred way, decentralized way. It is completely based on the kind of culture that we are associated with. That is what we need to take into consideration, right? So here we do talk of the basic aspects by which these organizations can really take into consideration those cultural variations and the kind of cultural variations which do have a significant impact on the business practices. We are talking of this contextual cultures. So when we to talk of these communication styles itself, we have understood highly contextual cultures like India, Japan, UK, where when people do interact with low contextual cultures, like in German or US and other countries, so there is a significant difference in terms of the communication style. Maybe the verbal or non-verbal communications, may it be the symbols that we do have, may it be the body languages that we do have, each and every culture is completely different from the other in terms of its significant impact. We need to take into consideration all of those issues. So unless and until dealt in a proper way, this communication can be one of the strongest barriers of our journey to the internationalization process. How do we build up these relationships, right? So here we need to understand. Now, say for example, whenever we are going for any such kind of business practices or any such kind of business dealings for any international level, in some of the Western countries, hugging one another or kissing on the cheek is common when you know one another for a bit of time. But hugging and kissing is sometimes perceived as very intimate in Asian culture. So it is completely avoided. It is completely avoided. So it is not preferred in a professional setting. That is what we need to understand. The kind of personal space that people do have, right? Each and every like culture to define a personal space, a family space, a societal space, public space. We need to understand all of those and the impact that all those do have on the organizations, processes. That is what we need to understand. So clearly, we need to talk of the differences that people do have in terms of cultures itself, in terms of decision making itself. As we do talk of whether these decisions are taken in a centralized way, whether these decisions are hierarchical in nature, whether the decisions are unilateral in nature, or there's a dispersed view, like we do talk of decentralization process, where now whether there is active participation of these people in the decision making process or not, all of those things do have an impact. Time management we have understood, right? So different cultures do have their significance importance of time. So unless and until it is understood, the business processes cannot be taken further into consideration. Work ethics and values, right? Like we do talk of this work ethics and values when we do talk of United States, right? People don't prefer to like go beyond what is not being expected out of them, right? But look, when there is a requirement, people used to contribute for the organizations, right? Say they don't hesitate to work for all the day when it is required. They don't hesitate to take a brief lunch or working lunch kind of thing, right? Or they don't hesitate to be available beyond the office hours to solve any issues related to the organization. So that is how they do value ethics, right? And similarly, we do talk of this conflict resolution. Here, we need to think of the basic dependence of the person's cultural context. Okay. We are talking of, say, for example, in if at all we would like to resolve a particular conflict which cannot be resolved in a bipartite way between the parties, we prefer to appoint a mediator to resolve the conflict. Okay. So taking a mediator, taking a lawyer for resolving a conflict in United States is common. But in some part of the Eastern economies, if you rely on a lawyer or a mediator to resolve any kind of conflict, it is being considered as something very offensive. So you cannot even suggest to have a the mediator to resolve a conflict. Those kind of differences are to be understood. So overall, whenever we talk of this culture or the impact that this culture does have on the internationalization processes, some of the common phenomena that we do take into consideration, like centralized decision making versus decentralized decision making. Okay? Whether these cultures do prefer top managerial people to take all the decisions, top managerial people to be involved in the process, or it allows the suggestions from the bottom level managers also, bottom level executives. That's what that makes it. Right? We to talk of safety versus risk itself. We are talking of some of the cultures, they completely avoid uncertainties. So they prefer to work in a highly safe zone as compared to others where they do take risks in the future. Right? Recognition of individual performances versus team performances, whether it is individualistic or collectivist approach, that is what we do. Informal versus formal chain of command, where most of the time where we do say whether the people do have the accountability to themselves, or people do have, the accountability for their higher authorities. How this process of objectives of the organization being decentralized to the bottom level. That is what we need to understand. Most of the Americans, they do prefer to work in a MBO approach, like Peter Drucker was defined this management by objectives, where these objectives are set at the organizational level, then gradually decentralized to the respective departments, to the individuals itself, and all the individuals do prefer to work in those kind of objectives. That is what we need to talk about, right? Short-term versus long-term orientation, whether you are focusing on the present time, as if in one of the theories we have understood. No? What is your concern? Whether you are concerned for the past activities, or you are reviewing in the present time, or you are concerned for the future time. All of those do have a significant impact on the business practices at the international level itself. Now, having this insight, let us understand the cultural diversities in different countries from the different economies of our world. Now, if I do talk of the major economies itself, right? Now, USA, European economies, and Japanese economies, it is commonly called as the triads, right? And these triads, like USA, UK, or European Association, we can say, or this Japanese associations, right? The Japanese countries, right? Most of the MNCs, they do origin in these countries itself, and most of the MNCs, they do have their presence as a subsidiary in majority of the countries around the globe. However, if we do talk of this African continents, or Asian continents, or Latin American continents itself, now they do have a small or limited number of multinationals as compared to these economies. So let us understand, analyze by taking some of the developed countries, their cultural practices, and some of the developing countries. So overall, here we have taken 7 such countries. Like under developed countries, we have taken United States of America, USA, Japan, and UK. Under developing countries, we do talk of this Turkey, India, Middle East, and China. Let us make an analysis of the cultures of these countries, which will enable us to understand the impact that these cultures do have on business practices. Right? Whenever we talk of this Japanese culture, right? So Japan is a country which is represented by a homogeneous culture. Right? There's a very less percentage of immigrants in Japan itself. Right? But whenever, like in Hofstede study, it is found that the Japanese people score was 46 on individualism as compared to 91 for US and 89 for UK. That means what? These Japanese people have more feelings towards groups and communities. There is a collectivist approach for this Japanese culture. And it is observed that these Japanese people are more loyal, and even they do sacrifice their interest for the overall groups of the organizations. Right? A collective approach is what they do prefer to have. Right? But these Japanese people are more diligent in their approach. They do have a strong sense of duty and indebtedness towards the organization. That is why you'll find out that those trade unions in Japan, they do focus more on cooperation and harmony. They are company driven, not trade driven, not craft driven, but they are driven by the company, and they do have their, more they do contribute for the organization through cooperations and harmony itself. Right. Would you say this Japanese people do prefer, ringi method of policy and decision making? What it says, this ringi method is, it's the individual level of counseling and problem solving abilities. Individual level of counseling and problem solving abilities, right? One more concept which is very important is this Nenko concept. That's a lifetime employment. People in Japan do prefer to have lifetime employment, right? But one of the typical characteristics is that they do not have, job specializations, or they don't believe in division of labor. Whatever the task that is being assigned to them, they will prefer to carry out all of those tasks. So through a systematic career progression, not based on job specializations, not based on division of labor, that makes these employees of the organization to have lifetime employment. Also, the promotion and career advancement systems are based on seniority, based on age group of people itself. So there's a distinct relationship between the people with younger age to the people with higher age. They do come out with their respect for them. So that is the reason why when this age appropriate wage systems are there, salary systems are there, promotional systems are there, career advancement systems are there, and that is what that make them more loyal towards the organization, who have their entire life devoted for the organization. Employees do see their company as a family, where a economically active and social unit, and that is why they do come out with their emotional dependence on the organization. That is why they do exhibit their loyalty towards the organization. Inclusiveness. Most of the time, these Japanese people do feel that, like, whenever we do talk of this individualism and collectivism approach, there we need to understand one thing. Like, some of the cultures are there which are highly individualistic. Some of the cultures are there which are collectivist. Like, collectivist means, say, when I do believe in collectivist approach, I do say in Indian context, how do we see collectivism? Our family members, whether it is nuclear, that is an individualistic approach. Most of the Western countries, they believe to have nuclear families. Indian context, it is collectivist, right? So whenever we do talk of our families, we do talk of joint families, right? Or like parents, grandparents, and uncle, aunt, niece, all of them, they stay together to define a collective approach, right? But some or other Indians don't include organizations to that, but Japanese people do include organizations to that also. That is why they do take organization as their family member, and more collectivism is there. So, they do exhibit their loyalty. We do talk of this Japanese people who believe in this teamwork, consensus as a distinctive Japanese culture, right? So everyone promotes that. Job rotations, which leads to employment flexibility, is a prominent feature. As I said, there is no such job specialization, no such division of labor. Everyone can move up in the organizational hierarchy by assigning, by taking up responsibilities of different types. So this is a common phenomenon. So employers, they do not hire on the basis of job specifications, but they do see the comprehensive qualification of the people for taking up any such assignment, and they do operate in a strict hierarchical system. So there's a distinction in terms of the hierarchical grades within the organizations. So contrary to this Japanese culture, if you to talk of this US culture, right? Whenever we to talk of this US culture, of course, United States has got one of the highest diverse background people, right? And some of the important characteristics of this United States culture, like they do have individualistic approach. Individualistic in a sense, people of United States, they believe in independence, being ambitious, being accepting their own things, right? Like they do believe that they are the people who can control their own fate. That is what, right? So they value freedom. They accept that their personal and financial success is more important for them, right? But as I said, they do have individualism approach, so they don't take these organizations as a part of their in groups, inner circle, right? So where everything is based on seniority, on age in Japanese culture. You see that United States people do prefer everything which is based on merits, on performances itself. Where Japanese people believe in promotions based on seniority, here you see US people do believe promotions, or managers in US, they do believe promotions on merit basis, not on seniority basis. They do have freedom to work and success itself, right? We to talk of this, diligence, long working hours, all of those are the common phenomenon in US. They can contribute, as I discussed in some of the previous points, like if it is required, they can contribute beyond the working hours, beyond the organizational hours, all of those things can be there. But because this US culture promotes more of individualistic approach, they do have high level of job specializations and division of labor itself. Right? So their starters, hierarchy, everything is performance oriented. If the roles and responsibilities are clearly defined, right? Persons do prefer their own career systems. They change their jobs frequently, not like lifelong employment in Japan. US people do change their jobs frequently because they would like to achieve success in a quick succession of time. Right? So here, managerial practices are also based on that. Like hire and fire is a common trend where people are not hired on the basis of the personal attributes, but people are hired on the basis of the job needs. People are hired on the basis of the need of the market, right? So job roles are clearly defined, and if at all people do not cope up with those kind of job roles, simply they are out of the organization. That is what we mean. People do not prefer to work with the jobs having unions, right? So they're anti-trade unionism. They do have this culture kind of thing, right? So they don't prefer to work with those organizations having unions and all those things. So employers' power is relatively high as compared to other cultures itself. As you can see that employers do not have any kind of obligations for the employees. Japanese people, they do have, but right. So there is a dislike for rules and regulations in the American culture itself. People do believe to have their own roles and responsibilities defined in a proper way, and everyone do contribute in terms of their roles and responsibilities, but they don't prefer to work under rules and regulations, right? So they exhibit incredible bureaucratic system and overproduction itself. Americans, like culture, do prefer high working hours, highest level of working hours, or they do have highest level of productivity. They prefer investing on training and developmental aspects. So the training and developmental cost is also a bit higher for the organizations. Right? So here you can see that most of the Americans, they do believe ethnocentric approach. Either what we'll see it in the next session, where we'll talk of these strategies for the international organizations itself, right? Okay. And if we to talk of the third country, UK, right? Whenever we are talking of this UK, actually this Scotland, England, Wales, and Northern Ireland, they do form this United Kingdom itself. But here you need to understand that this Englishmen, Britishers, they are highly individualistic. Right? So emphasis is given on freedom and liberty itself. But somehow from the history, it can be traced that there are considerations for community and group actions itself, right? So like we can see the history and the trade unionism movement began in United Kingdom itself. That shows that people are concerned for the groups and people are concerned for the community itself, right? But however, whenever we talk of this, union membership is craft based, and these union memberships do impact the entire organization. So significant impact is there for the organizations. When we do talk of this employer-employee relationship, it is purely contractual in nature. In a sense that employees do not expect the management to be involved in their day-to-day working lives or personal lives. Right? Employees do not expect that the managerial people should or managerial people would ever take care of their problems, will solve their issues, right? So we can say that the employer-employee relationship is more impersonal. Employer-employee relationship is more tax-oriented in UK culture. Right? Training, as like in USA, is mandatory aspect, right? Where a lot of investments are there. But in UK, this training is not taken as a strict course of action. And that is the reason why you see that the productivity of the employees are lower as compared to the productivity of employees in USA. Right? We're talking of workers and their superiors, right? They are assumed to be different, right? So from inside, outside, whatever it may be, they're different. People do have more care for their liberty and equality. Power inequality is there. Like that is why we do come out with this class consciousness, right? Like employees do have this power based on the individual's family background, educational background, all of those. Similarly, organizational hierarchies, they do have this discriminatory treatment itself. Like we do talk of this, higher hierarchical staff members are completely dealt in a different way than that of the lower hierarchical staff members of the organization. White collar employees, they are being treated in a different way. Their pay structure is different. Their working conditions are different. They do exhibit better power and authority with themselves as compared to the blue collar workers who are not being considered for that thing. We are talking of all of those differences are there in the organizations, right? Next, we will talk of some of the developing nations, like we will talk of Turkey. And why do we have taken this Turkey is because it is one of the biggest business partners of this European economy itself. But not only that, it is situated in the middle east of this Europe and Asia, it is gateway to three different major economies, right? And it is a developing economy with abundant natural resources itself. But Turkey has come out with its pro-market economic policy liberalizations, right? So investing a lot of foreign direct investments, and that is why this Turkey is being taken as one of the places where a lot of investments are made at the international level itself, right? But despite all of these diversities, Turkey is a country which is characterized as nationalism and secularism. Right? So their culture is a blend of conservative as well as traditional practices, a mixture of Western and Eastern values, a collectivist society, but where this masculinity and femininity values are on par. Power distances are large, uncertainty avoidance is strong. They maintain the status quo, they maintain the hierarchy, right? And these hierarchies are the ways through which they exhibit leadership and the respect their authorities itself. Authoritarian leadership is their highly centralized decision making process, highly personalized and strong leadership values. All of these are the typical characteristics of you know this Turkey culture, which is a mixture of Western and Eastern values. That is what we need to understand. Right? They are not social friendly, but they do maintain good interpersonal relationships. They are very empathetic and they do exhibit high level of tolerance. They don't like to change jobs frequently like the USA people, but they also don't like to have lifetime employment like Japanese people, right? So a long-term employment is what is being preferred by this Turkish culture. Moving to the next one, we do have this Arab and Middle East countries itself. When we do talk of this Middle East, we do talk of Cyprus, Turkey, Israel, Egypt, Iran, Oman kind of countries. They are grouped together, right? And most of the time, these Middle East countries do follow this Islamic culture, right? So aesthetic practices do have its own impact on the culture that we can think of it. Okay? But here the obligation is this inclination of personality, shared traits, similar language, religion, history, all of them, they make us more strong in terms of their cultural practices itself. But whenever we talk of this Arabian culture, they are more collectivists than individualists. Right? They do have strong feeling of faithfulness in their own bunch, and their own bunch includes their family members, excluding the organizations, right? Even some part of the organizations are in bunch, in group categories, but they do take like all their near and dear, close and distance relatives into that, right? They are paternalistic in their approach, dictators. They do have the initiative style across various associations itself. Right? One of the traditions, this majlis, is what that is being practiced and being taken over by many organizations. This is the way of holding council meetings. Right? Council meetings, in a sense that every member of the organization, they should be given that opportunity to come out with their own suggestions for that. Right? The members of the organization must think of contributing towards the goals of the organization. So they do have suggestion boxes where each and everyone is allowed to take part in the decision making process. Right? Higher level of expatriates. They do depend. Mostly they do depend on expatriates for their recruitment processes, but they do prefer to have higher level of expatriates recruited from developed countries. So they do prefer high position or hierarchical positions in the organizations are filled through people from USA, UK kind of countries. Whereas lower level jobs, their expatriates are recruited from developing countries. They do prefer countries like Pakistan, India, Malaysia, and all those kind of countries. Etc. What we need to understand is that there is a widespread disparity in terms of the working conditions from top level to the lower level positions in the organization. The working conditions starting from all such aspects of the administrative practices are completely different. Right? Healthy working environment to unhealthy, healthy payout to unhealthy, all of those. There's a clear like segregation in terms of the people itself, right? They do have a non-professional attitude towards the business. That is what we need to understand. But whenever we do talk of these Middle East people, individualistic approach towards work and they do prefer to work alone instead of a team. Okay? Approach is collectivist, but the responsibilities, accountabilities are on individuals. So that makes this Arabian culture more significant. Would you talk of Indian culture itself? India is commonly known as, or Indian culture is represented in terms of earthen Asian culture, right? We do have equal importance to both male and female itself. So India, in true sense, is called as a multicultural society, right? But some of the typical characteristics of Indian culture are like, we do talk of fatalistic approach in our like way of doing the things itself, perceiving the things. We do have more emotional expressiveness. We believe in hospitality, friendliness, the standard features that are the things, right? Collectivism is what that is shared by most of the people, right? And most of the people are community conscious itself. There's a significant power distribution in our society, right? Power distance in our society, we can say that. And all of this power distance that we do have in our society is because of the caste system itself, right? Like we do say power distance is observed because of seniority. We do have a respect for our senior people, right? But again, this power distance is there because of the rigid caste system, which is again acceptable by the people of India itself, right? So sometimes we do see organizations are hierarchical in nature, right? Where it is related to the caste system also. Right? Grade 1 employees, grade 2 employees, grade 3 employees, grade 4 employees. All of this, there is a distinction. But it is also observed that in a hierarchical system, zero power is given to the people of lower ranks than the people of higher ranks. Management is more of authoritarian, paternalistic in its approach, right? There's a distinction in terms of the white collar and blue collar employees. Trade unions are not craft based, but are driven by political parties itself, right? So where most of the union activities are politicized in Indian context itself. However, there are many such legislations which are being constituted by the constitution to safeguard the employees and their well-being itself. Everything is driven by the law, legal systems itself. Indians are more creative and dedicated to their work itself, right? So they like, but one thing is that we can take into consideration that Indians prefer to work under a boss, right? So even if the process of decentralization is there, even if the responsibility is given to them at independent level, but they would like to have the endorsement of their higher authorities, superiors, before making any kind of decisions. So only after having the approval they would prefer to do that. Okay. And let's talk of the last part of our study, like the human resource management practices in China itself. If we talk of this China, right? So this Chinese economy is completely under the socialistic rule until 1978, where this several market reforms were introduced, decentralization decision making were introduced. Other than that, they have always preferred the command over their life and security from the past itself, right? These Chinese, they have diversity due to various ethnic groups within that, right? But one of the basic philosophy, that this Confucian philosophy, what values more development, significant relations, connections, family direction, regard for age and order, idea of destiny, all of them that is being taken into consideration, right? So these Chinese are collectivists. They lean towards the group. They do have, there's a lack of discipline and willingness that these supervisors to control their behavior. There have been no independent trade unions. Trade unions are often politicized. Right? There is a tenacity for maintaining this political relationship instead of goals of the organization. Right? So managers do prefer to have more on rules and regulations itself, acquaintances on control and acknowledgements. However, somehow rather this newer generation is bit, tolerant, assertive, and lenient itself about these rules and regulations. So what we need to understand is all of these like organizational practices are completely based on the kind of culture that we would like to adopt for our subsidiary. Right? Unless and until having an adaptation to that, it will be very difficult for us to survive. So here are some of the points that we need to take into consideration. Like there has to be proper culture awareness, cultural training, cross-cultural training can be there, adaptability training can be there. We should develop respect and empathy for that. Communication should be taken, relationship, local partnership. Nowadays, we do talk of this diversity, equity, inclusion, and belongingness. All of these practices are to be taken into consideration for having success in carrying out our business in different economies, different cultures. So let's end up over here. And thank you very much for the session. And once again, we'll continue with the strategic aspects in the next session. Thank you. Have a good day.